do we have a scholarly approach to how we train our students? And it turns out that because we were such good scholars, number one in psychology, because we had dealt with this quite well, our students need to learn how to deal with gay and lesbian clients. How will they deal with them? Have they been out and having that practice? Do they know how to say that here's who I am and who are you and do you want to work with me? They had handled that very well. And as a result, when push comes to shove, the national committee that looks at that says, well, they're doing well enough, we'd better do it. Besides that, we have some friends in court. We have some senators who were saying, we'll disenfranchise you, APA, if you don't allow a religious exception in this current world that's more open to secular, that is, religion is part of the environment. So it isn't either or, but it seems like there's probably both here, that we'd better be pretty good at knowing what we believe and why, and how to, but also how to talk about that in another language, and how to be very good scientists to have some credibility.
Can I just add one thing?
You want to go ahead?
And maybe it's just because I'm in a very slippery discipline relative to some of the other sciences, but I think we also ought to be critical scholars of our own field in the sense that, well, is this established and what are the assumptions upon which it's established and just how good is the research? And those are sort of easy pickings in some of the social sciences, a little harder in some of the hard sciences, but that's the other half of this equation of how you do this. You try to establish in good scholarly work for what we believe to be the case, and then you look and say, well, what's the case on the other side? Is this more consensus than data, more consensus than analysis? And so we have to be critical. Sorry.
Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to reaffirm my belief in what Richard is saying. I think he's hit upon a very important point in that this, to me, is scholarship based on faith. Faith in true religion. True religion being tethered in truth. There is no fear. There's nothing that we have to be afraid of. Now, in some of the disciplines, as you said, some of the disciplines, it's much more difficult to define what is true, which is why when I was a senior at BYU, double majoring in political science or genetics, I chose to go into genetics, because it was much easier and much more comfortable for me to be able to define truth in that discipline. My hat's off to all of you philosophers and others. But I think that is critical. To me, that is very, very liberating about the gospel. And I think, in a sense, depending on how we define apologetics, everyone is an apologist, because everyone has those preconceived notions, as I think the Jacobsens point out very, 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 very articulately in their book and in their approach, that we all have preconceived notions and meta-questions that affect the way we look at the world. And to me, being able to march forth and not be worried about, wow, what if there's evidence for Asian DNA in the Americas? The Book of Mormon won't be true. Well, guess what? We believe in truth. We believe in embracing all truth. And when the church recognizes something as truth, they may go so far as to change the explanatory introduction to the Book of Mormon to reflect that truth as an accepted entity.
Thank you. Jack, you had a comment?
I want to come back to the point about the opportunities that this new development, and I thought Jacobsens did a wonderful job of anecdotally telling us what's going on out there. It resonated with my experience. I think that we are needed in the academy, and we will be invited into the academy because people now want to know what is a Mormon position on a certain issue. We need to know what their big questions are and be prepared to answer those questions from a Mormon perspective. I can give several examples of this. Well, it was a year ago, I was invited to speak to the Christian Ethical Society in England. They wanted to know, what do Mormons make of the Sermon on the Mount, because they were having a whole conference on the Sermon on the Mount as an ethical foundation. I was the first Mormon to ever be invited to that group. And I had to be able to speak in their language, but they didn't want me really to be talking their language. They wanted me to be contributing to what they might learn from us. As a law professor, I was invited 2 years ago to speak at Fuller Theological Seminary on what what is a Mormon perspective on law and leadership? And I think I was the first Mormon to ever speak at poetry on this. But again, it was the same question. They wanted me to be informed and able to talk on their terms. But they were really interested in what we as Mormons would have to say to contribute to that dialogue. Now, I guess this means we have to be bilingual, as Maxwell always encouraged us to be. We have to be able to understand and read in their language, but maybe more speak still in our own. And I think there are lots of opportunities like this, and I think this is a historic occasion for us here at BYU to be talking this way. We need to spend more time, I think, asking these questions, anticipating where they will come, and working out, well, what would I say if I had an opportunity come my way? Those opportunities are there. If we're prepared, I believe that the Lord will open the doors for us in coincidental and really unusual ways that we can't even anticipate how it will be that someone will become aware that we might have something to contribute to that conversation. If we're prepared, the Doctrine and Covenants says we shall not fear. But if we're not prepared, I don't think we can expect the Lord to open a way for us to go and fall on our face. So we've got to really do our homework. And so I think it is a great opportunity for us. And if I could take one last second to put in a plug for BYU Studies. I think that BYU Studies, which has celebrated its 50th anniversary, is a place where lots of this kind of thinking has actually gone forward. And we weren't trained at Stanford or Berkeley, at Oxford or Duke or wherever we were to do this kind of thing. But we have in BYU Studies a reservoir of examples of people like Midley, who was more of a scholar than an apologist. He's more critical of Mormonism than most people think. We've got Truman Madsen, we've got Bob Thomas, you go down the list. Terry Warner. I don't want to start singling out anybody, but hundreds of our best predecessors have done things that I think we can really take advantage of. I think our next job is to be more descriptive. We have to talk about, to describe what it would be to be a Mormon response without being prescriptive to anybody. And publishing in BYU Studies is a way to get those things in circulation. We'd love to hear from you.
You're welcome for the moment for a paid political. I didn't even have to pay me for that. Kent, last comment on this, and then I want to move to what you've just teed up, I think, Jack, which is what are the implications, what are the contributions BYU scholars could make in this kind of world? Kent?
Well, I appreciate what Rick said about the openness, and Bob mentioned in the outset, reading from several different sources, that all truth, we can embrace it and not be afraid of it, because it won't contradict, anything that it should be frightened by. I'm reminded of a visitor that came a few years ago to our college. He was one of the best geneticists we could find in the country. We had an issue, we brought in 3 people to discuss about the relationship of DNA and genealogy. And he said, how did the Mormon Church, how is it they were so wise back in the days of Darwin not to take an official stand against evolution? How were they able to leave themselves an opening? And it's made me think of several things that, if these are my own thoughts. I spent a lot of time in Islamic countries, and I thought, what if they embraced the gospel and the patriarch gave them their allegiance to Abraham through Ishmael? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Or some people say, well, that's blasphemous. But some of these truths, what if we found out that homosexuality was inherited, at least half of it? What a relief that would be to some of the people who suffer from same-sex attraction. So there's a lot of these things that we could be open to, and yet I sense we're afraid to, because it challenges what we think our say that harmonizes, as I see it now, with a different perspective from someone else's point of view. To me, that's what's encouraging about our discussion.
Thank you. Can we talk, panel, for just a minute about what are the implications, what are the contributions, I should say, that BYU scholars could make in this kind of environment that the Jacobsens are describing? What sorts of things do you see us uniquely able to contribute? You've already made some comments that are in that direction, but go ahead, Richard.
I think that we need to decide where in our own disciplines or how the gospel matters, just in case it's true, to ask ourselves that question. And it will matter more in some disciplines than others, and it will matter differently in some disciplines than others. And sometimes it will influence our practice and our teaching more than our scholarship, but we just have to be thoughtful about that, I think. The other thing that I think is most important is that we agree to push the disciplines with at least as much zeal as our critics and some among us self-styled intellectuals push the church. That is, whenever we say, you know, truth will out, then people want to push against the doctrine of the church, but they leave the disciplines get a free pass on that. And so I think we need to be as critical of those disciplines as we are, as anyone is of the church. And just say, you know, we may be looking through a very small window right now, and everybody knows the sciences always say that, but in my experience it's not practiced too much. We should be as critical of those disciplines as we possibly can, because only then will truth will out. And don't accept the landmarks, the fences, and other things that others have put up for us. I think we have a wonderful opportunity to be on the forefront, if we will, and to do so in ways that will, in the end result, be faithful and help others be faithful.
Does that work for you, Ross? Can you apply what Richard just said?
Not in the physical sciences much. There's sort of no Mormon perspective on physics or chemistry.
I don't think so either. I didn't mean to apply that.
No,
that was what I wanted to establish.
Some disciplines are different. They're very different. There is something strange we see happening in our department, though, and it probably happens in other physical science departments. For some reason, LDS students come here wanting to do it. There was a period, sort of starting about 20 years ago, when physics almost died in America as an undergraduate major. We didn't experience that here. And people keep wondering why. What are you doing that makes it so you have a vibrant undergraduate physics program? And when we survey our students, they come that way. They really want to do it. There's something about the LDS worldview that the high school students pick up that makes them want to study the world. And we are pumping out chemistry majors and physics majors and mathematicians at a pretty good rate out of BYU, and people notice.
People have come to your department to ask you that question.
Yeah.
What are you doing, haven't they?
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing. But we're happy to have them come and give us some exposure.
But if you had a way to ask them what are their living questions and why is this important for them and how does it relate to their religion, is there some way that helps contribute to a world where people are wondering, not only does Ross Spencer know his vocation and why he's doing it, but also there's his students. Do they know how to talk about who they are in that context? Is there something that's not critiquing the field, but contributing people who know how to talk about being believing scientists?
Yeah, it sort of doesn't come up, actually, when they talk to us.
It's a question, but it sounded like an invitation, too. So go ahead, Bob.
Alan, I was just going to say something I said at the very beginning, and I would sort of agree with something that Jack Boak said, which is this in some context for me is historical, what's happening here, but I think part of going out and contributing is to understand the platform from which we're coming. And I think often if you step outside of your own discipline, you have a clearer idea as you come back into your discipline of what it is that you're trying to do or what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I like this quote from Einstein, for example. He said, "Although I am a typical loner in my daily life, my awareness of belonging to the invisible community of those who strive for truth